Yeah, super excited to be here. Today I'm going to make for you 3 different dishes that demonstrate my root to fruit eating philosophy, which is a climate-friendly approach to food that has potentially 0 cost. Because whenever I talk about food and cooking for the planet, the 2 main barriers that people talk about are the cost and the time it takes to prepare food. So that's always been at the forefront of my mind when I'm writing. I should mention I now am more of a food writer than a chef. I spend most of my time writing zero waste columns for The Guardian and cookbooks like Eating for Pleasure, People and Planet. And yeah, I guess I should start at the beginning of my sustainability story. In 2011, I was invited by Tristram Stewart, the author of Waste, A Global Scandal, to feed 200 people using nothing but food that would have otherwise been wasted. So in central London, we had to build a kitchen on the bridge and feed 200 people all this potentially basically rubbish food. And it was an incredible event. It changed my life. I was astounded by the incredible produce that was donated to us that would have otherwise gone in the bin. We had organic, beautiful, ripe tomatoes that were the best I've ever tried, cauliflowers that we gleaned from fields, and other incredible ripe produce that just didn't have the shelf life to sell but was perfectly fine to eat. This event changed my life. I decided that actually there's more important things than taste when it comes to cooking, and that might be a controversial thing for a chef to say, but the truth is the ethics of our food's really important. And when we have the ability to support better farming, I feel like it's our responsibility, especially as chefs and especially as corporations and food producers, because our impact is multiplied by the number of mouths that we're feeding as a chef or industry professional. But of course, even as home cooks, we have a responsibility to feed our families well. So after this event, I decided I wanted to communicate these lessons I'd learnt about food waste to a wider audience. So I sat down and ruminated and thought about these issues and came down to this realization that I feel like we waste food because we've lost touch with its true value and ultimately nature. So all of my work from that point on became about trying to mend that broken connection. And what better way to do that than through food? Because food is nature. And so I coined the term root to fruit eating. Root to fruit eating is a climate positive approach to food that has 0 cost. Originally, I wanted to communicate quite simply 0 waste cooking, eating the whole ingredient from root to fruit. The stalks, the leaves, the skin, and everything in between. But I quite quickly realized that food waste is just a symptom of a broken food system, and it's the tip of the iceberg of the climate crisis, which our food system contributes to greatly. In fact, 1/3 of all anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions are from our food system. And our food system is the greatest cause of biodiversity loss. So it's actually one of the biggest opportunities that we have to help mend our food system. And so that's what root to fruit eating is all about. There's 3 steps that make root to fruit eating possible. And I'm going to talk you through them today by making 3 different recipes. So I'm going to step one is reduce waste. So I'm going to make apple scrap cider vinegar. Step two is eat more plants. So I'm going to make a multi-grain seed milk. And then step three is eat the best food you can. So I'm going to make an incredible, simple chocolate truffle using bean-to-bar chocolate from Africoa. And we're then going to do a chocolate meditation to think a little bit about where that comes from and how that can help us even enjoy it more and certainly respect it more and waste less. So, should we start?
I'm very excited. I can't wait. And we're also going to have some tasters of everything later. So yay for that.
Yeah. The first taster, is just some cider vinegar water because of the benefits of cider vinegar, but also the fact that you can, okay, today I've got 2 whole apples, but the idea for this recipe is that you can, if you peel your apples, you can save the peelings and you can save the cores to make a really high value product. We're using some Simple Truth raw live cider vinegar because of as a starter, essentially, to kind of kickstart the process. But raw apple cider vinegar is an incredible product because it's so health-giving and yet it tastes delicious too. In fact, the benefits from apple cider vinegar are numerous, from weight loss to helping us control our blood sugar levels and feed our guts through the probiotics from the fermentation process. And it's really, really simple to make. You do need some raw cider vinegar to start the first batch, but then once you've got your first batch, you can then keep a little bit to make the next. And it's just a tablespoon that we need. So I would save any peelings or cores and put them in the freezer if you don't have enough to make a batch. But today I'm just going to use 2 whole apples and I'm just going to roughly chop them. They can be chopped however. In fact, you could use windfall apples. If you had an apple tree near you, or a neighbor that was growing apples, you could take some of the apples that have fallen on the floor and use them to make apple cider vinegar as well.
So what we have are some tasters coming out of the apple cider vinegar, if you'd like to have a sample.
Yeah, so I like to drink apple cider vinegar before a meal to help prepare me to eat, but also I like it, it's like a cordial, it's like a sugar-free cordial, essentially. It's an acquired taste, so the first time you have it, you might just be like, what's this? But it's also a health boost. So it's nice to think of it like that as well. I'd like to, if you can't see what I'm doing here, you can look at these screens up the top, which might give you a clearer image of what I'm preparing. But I think I should let you know that today I've chosen quite intentionally to make 3 incredibly simple recipes because I want you to walk away with some new skills and techniques rather than an elaborate dish that you might never make. If you can make your own cider vinegar, it could save you a lot of money as well, actually. And it's as simple as putting our apples in a jar, covering them with water, and activating them with a little bit of sugar and a little bit of cider vinegar and letting them ferment. So I should mention I'm a whole food chef, and that's come about from a love of whole foods. As a vegetarian child, I loved whole food shops and things like that, but it's also become more of a way of life because of my zero waste approach. Because whole foods are essentially inherent in a zero waste system. Because when we're refining sugar and wheat and other products, we're removing the most nutritious part. And we're often discarding it or using it for animal feed or other purposes. So what we're doing is we're removing the most nutritious part of that ingredient. So the more you can add back, the more nutrition you're saving. So in our house, as a baseline, we have like super nutritious bread, like Danish rye or German rye bread, and other ingredients that are just like healthy and delicious and inherently zero waste because they're a whole food. So apple cider vinegar, I'm going to add a little, we've got some coconut blossom sugar. You could use any sugar at all. And I'm going to add, so to about 200 grams of apple, I'm going to add a couple of teaspoons of sugar and a couple of teaspoons of cider vinegar, just to kickstart it. Think of it like sourdough. We're just kickstarting the fermentation process. And then I'm going to cover it with water. And then we're going to let it ferment. So this is the bit that takes a little bit of patience. Have you got 3 weeks? Can you? So now I'm going to let this ferment for 3 weeks.
Can I ask a question about this process? Where is it best to store these jars? Did you put them in like a dark cupboard? Does it matter?
Good question, yeah. So it's best to store any ferment out of direct sunlight because the sun will essentially change the temperature. You want a reasonably steady temperature, so you're correct in thinking that a dark cupboard is quite a good place. Although I like to see my ferments so that I can check on them regularly. So I'll kind of just put them at the back of the kitchen somewhere where I know I can check on them. And now what we'll do is you can either cover these with cheesecloth and a rubber band or piece of string, or you can just leave the lid on loosely. You can also weight down the apples. If they're submerged below the liquid, there's less chance of mold. A little bit of mold's fine, don't worry about it, just remove it. And for the first few days, you just need to give them a quick stir every morning and then leave them for about 3 weeks until the apples change color and drop to the bottom. And then we'll strain it and bottle it. Ideally in a dark bottle, like for the same reason that it will help prolong its life, but also without allowing much oxygen in contact with the surface. So at the moment, when we're doing the first fermentation process, you want that the oxygen is going to help the fermentation. But once it's fermented and ready, you want a tight-necked bottle and to seal it, and then it will last. It's actually better if you keep it in the. You want to leave it then for about another month until it starts to taste like vinegar. You can get fancy and use pH testers and stuff like that, but really you just need to taste it. And if it tastes like vinegar, it's vinegar. And then it's actually better if you can leave it in the back of a dark cupboard for about 6 months. It will start to age and become delicious. And then you've got this kind of constant store of incredible vinegar. It's incredibly simple to make, and although it takes a little bit of time, after those couple of months, you've suddenly like cracking it open and kind of celebrating your home-cooked food from scratch. I've also got recipes for this online. If you Google Tom Hunt cider vinegar, then there's some other details around like how to ferment it and the kind of finer points of watching for the mold and things like that, which you really don't need to worry about. Or at all. Cheese is mold, right? So that's our cider vinegar.
And what do you all think of the samples? Yeah? Good? Delicious?
That's the Simple Truth cider vinegar. Just in a little bit of water. It's really like before a meal to help control your blood sugar levels. It's a really good idea just to have either a glass of water with a bit of cider vinegar in it or just a salad dressed with some vinegar. And actually it doesn't need to be cider vinegar. It can be any vinegar. although apple cider vinegar tends to have extra health benefits, especially if it's live and raw and fermented. So next I'm going to make a multi-seed plant milk. I figured people may have made plant milk before at the Plant Powered Show.
Maybe for anyone here who doesn't know, let's talk about the process, because I know we're familiar with things like oat milk now, of course almond milk, macadamia milk is something we've seen quite a bit of in South Africa as we grow macadamias here. What are some of the other milks? Hemp seed milk I've made before, which is quite nice. It's probably the only seed milk I've made.
Yeah.
Is the process similar in concept as making an almond milk with the seeds?
It's exactly the same. But why I chose to do a multigrain seed milk today is because we can support biodiversity through agrodiversity. So I mentioned at the beginning of the demo that food is the greatest driver of biodiversity loss. But the brilliant thing is that we can, by eating more diversely, we can support biodiversity and all life on Earth. So I've chosen hemp seeds, sunflower seeds, and pumpkin seeds for this recipe to add that diversity into the milk, but for the planet, but also for the taste and for the nutrition it gives us. So hemp seeds are super nutritional and delicious, but they're also an incredible crop to grow for the planet. They're literally a weed, right? So they grow very well in an organic farming system. And we need to see more organic farming or more agroecological farming if we're going to start supporting the planet. Okay. Agroecological farming, for those of you that don't know, is essentially an approach to farming that considers the ecology and environment within its processes. So rather than just using the soil as a substrate and filling it with chemicals to help the plants grow, you try and support the biodiversity of the soil and improve the soil quality as well, and which in turn supports the biodiversity above ground. So you've got the flora and fauna within the soil, like the nematodes and critters and bacteria that really go up through the food chain all the way to humans, through the plant life and bigger animals as well. So the seed milk's really quite fun to make, and I don't like it in my coffee, but I love it as a drink. So we're going to do a taster of this in a second as well. If the chefs have got one, please bring out the plant milk taster. To make this one more interesting, as well as the hemp, pumpkin, and sesame sunflower seeds, I'm sweetening it with some dates and some vanilla as well. So it's a nice drink to enjoy. And so to make it, whether it's a nut, a seed, or oat, you simply soak your product overnight, and that helps break down the cells. It may even activate it and start to bring the seed to life, which is going to help increase the nutrition of the food as well. And then you drain and throw away that liquid, because any impurities you'll then discard, and you then add fresh water to it. So this, I think, is 100 grams, which have swelled now, so they're much more than 100 grams now, of the seeds. And
what is your ratio in here? Is it equal parts or higher parts of sunflower? Or
I just went for equal, but anything would do. So you can use what you've got. And then I'm going to add 4 dates for sweetness, but again, no dates is fine. And then a little bit of vanilla essence for flavor, and a pinch of salt. Is there any sea salt around? Maybe in the... Yeah. A little bit of sea salt. That's going to help bring out the flavors as well.
What do you think of the taste?
The taste has come out. Nice. I actually love the taste of there's the hemp in there. I think it adds tons of flavor. It's really delicious. Sorry, you had a question.
Can I bring you the microphone so everyone can hear?
I just wanted to ask, with the apple cider vinegar,
Yeah.
can you add sparkling water to ferment it, or is it just still water?
I don't know about using sparkling water. When you ferment something, it has it kind of naturally creates a gas, but I don't think adding sparkling water would facilitate that. I'm not sure.
Might make it a nice drink, though.
It might be worth an experiment. Okay, so I just need some water.
I have one more question quickly over here, if that's okay, Tom.
Yeah.
Sorry to be a pain. I wanted to ask you, the seeds, you said you could have them activated. But,
Yeah.
If you had it sprouted,
Yeah.
would it give a different flavor or not really?
Yeah, if they're fully sprouted, I think they become more bitter. Maybe too bitter. So you might want to, if you wanted to like optimize the nutrition, you might let them sprout until you just see them going, like the little tail cracking through. I think that would get your optimum nutrition. But any more than that, yeah, I've not tried it, but I have tried a sprouted chickpea hummus, and that was super bitter. Yeah.
It's really delicious. I'm trying some now. Lovely.
So I'm using filter water today, but you can use any water. I mean, I might suggest at home with fermentation as well, actually, that you pour your water into a wide-mouthed container the day before you make a ferment, or even drink the water to allow the chlorine to evaporate. Chlorine inhibits the process of fermentation. It is actually okay. It will still ferment, but if you think the chlorine's been put there to help purify the water, that kills the good bacteria and the bad. So in order to allow the good bacteria to flourish and dominate your fermentation, you need to give it the best possible chance of doing that. But saying that, I often just use tap water and it's fine. This is a little bit short on 750 mils, but I'm adding 750 mils of water to this. Maybe there's some water in here. It's not hot, so that's fine.
I was going to say earlier in the previous demos, we had a little struggle with the blender, so it needs a bit of elbow grease. Just a heads up. What do you guys think of the plant milk on that side? Yes? Enjoying it?
So I'm just going to blend this, ideally in a high-powered blender, for about 30 seconds to a minute to break down the seeds as much as possible. But because they've been soaked, they should blend quite nicely. And then we're going to strain them out.
I have a little giveaway to do while you're doing that, if that's
Great.
okay. So one of our vegan farms, wine farms, that's on board as we're talking about liquids, is giving away a few bottles of wine. But also for those of you who have your tickets, they will allow you a free wine tasting at the farm if you take your plant-powered show ticket there. So just a good one to keep hold of that. So my question for those who want to win a bottle of this beautiful wine is, who can name the 3 seeds that are now in that milk? That yellow arm went up first. What are they? Yes? Yay! Congratulations! Longridge is the wine estate. Longridge. It's outside Stellenbosch.
Okay. We've actually got some more giveaways, as well as the chocolate truffle tasting, which we'll be doing shortly. Africoa have kindly donated loads of chocolate bars to us. So there should be enough for every couple of friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought we'd just wait till we get going on the chocolate, but we can absolutely show some of the beautiful packages here now already. Who here is a chocolate fan? Right? All of us.
So there's one bit of kit that really helps with nut milk, and that's a nut milk bag. It's made of cheesecloth. You could just use a tea towel. For years I used a tea towel. Occasionally it would spill all over the counter. It was fine, but this is much better. Cheesecloth works fine too. You could just sew up a bit of cheesecloth. And it just really helps because the pulp in there, from the hemp seeds in particular, is quite hard if you're using a whole hemp seed. And it has a texture on the teeth that's not so nice, but it's fine when you pour it through a muslin. The pulp's actually still quite nutritious, and so you can keep the pulp and add it into things like brownies and stuff like that. The hemp, well, actually there isn't any hemp in here, but it's got a kind of interesting kind of beige color that comes a lot from the hemp as well. And you could just hang this up and let it strain through. And just slowly let it drain through. And then you can store this in the fridge for up to a week or in the freezer for longer. And yeah, just enjoy it as, I like it iced, particularly nice. But yeah, we should try some.
I must say the sample was absolutely delicious.
Oh, good.
Who is ready to potentially get some truffles out before we start the next recipe?
Actually, before we hand out the truffles,
Yes.
we're going to do a meditation and all try the chocolate truffle together at the same time.
Amazing. Let's do that.
So first, I'd like to just really quickly demo how to make them because they're so simple, and then we can all try them at the same time.
Okay, perfect. I'll tell them to just hold. Because I
hold
think
back on
they're
that
very
for just
keen
a
to get them
second. We
out.
could give out the actual chocolate
Yes.
bars.
So we have got some incredible chocolate bars here from Africoa. For all of those, I actually I wasn't familiar with the brand before, but they are beautiful. How lovely is the packaging? So we do have quite a few. So I'm thinking maybe I can dish some out. This is going to be very random.
Can we do one between two if people are together, and
Yes.
otherwise if anyone's on their own they can take a bar?
I'm going to start here and here.
Okay, so I would like to ask you not to eat the chocolate yet because it'd be nice to try the truffle together at the same time in a bit and all experience chocolate for the first time today together. But I know that's a big ask. Okay, so these chocolate truffles are uber simple. I've designed them so that they enhance the taste of the cacao. And I've done that by simply doing creating a water ganache. So normally a chocolate truffle might be made with cream, whether that's dairy or plant-based. But actually, I don't know who here has tried chocolate sorbet, but were you blown away by the intensity of the chocolate flavor? I was, and that's because the water and the salt bring out the flavor of the chocolate. So this is just a water ganache with a little bit of salt. I don't even add any sugar to just intensify the flavor of the cacao. Because I've chosen to make these chocolate truffles or to demonstrate step 3 of root for eating, which is eat the best food you can. I don't know about you, but I can buy a bar of dairy milk or a kind of sugary milk chocolate and eat the whole bar. Whereas a high cacao and high quality cacao chocolate, I'll tend to enjoy just a nice piece of. Although I have been known to eat the whole bar too.
I have 2 bars left with me. I just want to make sure that we spread them out. We'll have to pass one to the back. Do you mind helping me out? Thank you. And
I
one
just need a
more.
measuring jug or scales. Have we got a scales
Thank you.
or measuring jug? So I'm using Africoa, the bean to bar chocolate, which was grown in Tanzania. It's their 80% variety, vegan. So it's just cacao butter, and sugar. 200 grams, and I'm going to add 100 grams of water, hot, just just boiled but not quite. If it's too hot, it can split the chocolate. But don't worry if you do split the chocolate. Thank you. It's actually okay. 1 second. I'm just going to... It's quite good to know that almost to the gram, a millimeter to the gram converts. So you can use a scales to weigh liquids, which I've found really helpful when I'm kind of cooking recipes and stuff like that. So I'm going to add 100 grams. It's basically 2 times the chocolate to 1 of the water. I'm going to add 100 grams because it's quite a small batch. Either going over or under by a lot will affect the texture of the chocolate or the final truffle. Hang on, my nut milk's spilling over here. Is there a tea towel or anything, please? Just to catch this liquid. And then I'm going to leave that for 30 seconds before giving it a stir. I'm going to add a little bit of salt. That's also going to bring out the sweetness of the chocolate and the flavor. Just a pinch. And do you know if there's any spoons up here? I could use one of these, I guess. And then after about 30 seconds, I'm just going to stir this very gently. Agitate it a little bit. The chocolate, if you overmix it, can split and become a bit oily and gritty. Like I said before, it's actually fine. You'll just have more texture in your truffle. But if you want a creamier texture, then take some care with the preparation and melting of the chocolate. It's also good to know that you only need to give it a gentle stir to start with, and then as it starts to melt, you can stir it a little bit more. And then we're going to pour it into a tray with parchment paper to stop it sticking. These are super lazy truffles. So rather than spend ages rolling them into balls and getting your hands all dirty, once they've set like this, you can simply chop them up into pieces and dust them with cacao if you like. In a minute, we'll hand out these tasters. How are we doing for time?
We are still good for time. I think the tasters are ready as soon as you're ready for us to get it. It's like that delayed gratification, right?
Yeah.
But we've had some plant milk and some apple cider vinegar as well. And so for me, it's been a lovely journey so far of having these different types of flavors coming through.
Okay, so this is melted beautifully. It hasn't split, thank goodness. And then we can just pour it into here, and then I'll set it in the fridge. Just like that. As simple as that. And then we'll serve that at the demo tomorrow. Here's one we made earlier, or the kitchen kindly made earlier. Now, for this, I'm just going to chop it into serving portions, dust it with cacao, and then it's ready to taste. So we could hand out those tasters now.
They're on their way.
Great. I'd just like to ask you to hold on to your truffle when you're given one for a second, and then we'll taste them together at the same time, because I think there's something in that unified experience. Also, I want to guide you how you might taste the chocolate. So if you take a piece of chocolate and a serviette and then just hold on to it for a second, we can taste it. So I'm just going to dust these in a sieve. It's a nice little chefy trick. It saves a bit of time. It's quite quick.
I've got a question over here. Just
I'm a bit
one
short
second.
on spoons, but...
Yeah, Tom, could you just tell us again what chocolate you used? Is it a powdered chocolate? Is it?
Yeah, I'm going to go into quite a bit of detail in just a second as we taste the truffle together. So that's the perfect question. So, the truffles are dusted with cacao and they're ready to taste. So once everyone's got a truffle, I'm going to guide you through tasting them together. But first, I want to talk a little bit about cacao itself. I'm fascinated with cacao because it's such a luxurious and wonderful product, but it's also really interesting where it's grown. It's the Theobroma cacao tree grows within 20 degrees of the equator in a kind of humid rainforest-like region. This was grown in Tanzania, in Kiala, one of the 7 districts of the Mbeya region. And I was looking up the region earlier and looking at the incredible flora and fauna that exists there. So whilst you're holding on to your truffle, I'd like to invite you to think about the region where this is grown. Because this is a plant you're about to eat that was grown in a humid region of Tanzania in amongst an incredible diversity of plants. And it's really interesting to think. I think of biodiversity and terroir. Some of you may have heard of terroir in relation to wine, but actually terroir can be applied to any product, especially chocolate, but even a turnip, whether it was grown in one field or the next, or especially from one country or one side of the world to the next, it's going to affect the flavor. And biodiversity is one of the main components of terroir. Terroir really means it's really kind of a way of expressing how the environment around that product, whether it's a grape, a cacao, or a turnip, was grown. Because there's biodiversity in terms of the species of the cacao, but it's how the genes of that species are expressed that is interesting. So the terroir around an ingredient, the environment around an ingredient affect the expression of the genes within that product. Are you following? So what's really interesting about this is that you can start to realize by visualizing the forest in Tanzania where this was grown, how that might have affected the flavor. So in order to taste the chocolate, I'd like you to start by pinching your nose and closing your eyes if you feel comfortable, and placing the chocolate on your tongue whilst holding your nose, because this is going to cut off your flavor senses. So whilst holding your nose, I'd like you to just meditate on the texture of the truffle. Is it creamy and unctuous and rich, or is it gritty? And then I'd like you to release your nose, and you should get a massive explosion of flavor. And what you're tasting is the biodiversity and terroir of that cacao that was grown in Tanzania, as well as the species of cacao and the farmers and how they laid their hand to that chocolate, and of course the producers, Africoa, and how they then processed it. But all of that knowledge, ancient and new, comes together within that expression of flavor and chocolate. I feel like I should
Delicious.
try these. Any questions?
I'm coming.
I'm going to ask like a chefy kind of question. I want to know, as a ganache, would it set, like if I put it on like a brownie or a cake just with the water?
Yeah, it will set like this. Yeah. It's pretty glossy. Yeah. No, it's essentially a ganache. It's like the simplest truffle you could make.
You don't temper it or anything?
No, if you temper it, you'll get a shinier finish, but I'm a lazy chef, so.
Any other questions?
But just to Emily's got a question.
What would happen if you leave it overnight?
The chocolate, it would set beautifully and be ready to eat the next day.
But I'd have to cover it, otherwise someone might have a little taste in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Hey?
But just to conclude, kind of, yeah, what I've been talking about today is really just about eating for pleasure and learning a bit more about where your food comes from, and where you can, investing in eating better. That's it.
Beautiful. Oh, there. Sorry, my sound. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.